Let's talk about something that is, no joke, the secret engine behind almost everything you do online. It's called an API. Now, that stands for Application Programming Interface, but honestly, you don't need to remember that. What you do need to know is that it's the magic that makes our digital world tick.
Have you ever stopped to think, how does my weather app know it's going to rain in 30 minutes? Or how can a travel site pull up flight prices from hundreds of different airlines all at once? They're not magic, I promise. They all use the exact same, surprisingly simple secret. It's this one fundamental concept that lets all these different apps and services talk to each other. And today, we're going to break down exactly what it is.
So, how can we possibly understand this without diving into a bunch of scary code? Easy. We're going to use something you already know inside and out: ordering dinner at a restaurant.
Okay, think about it. When you're at a restaurant, you don't just walk into the kitchen and start making your own food, right? Of course not. You look at the menu, a list of what's possible, and you tell the waiter what you want. The waiter then takes your order to the kitchen does all the hard work, and then finally, the waiter brings your food back to you. The crucial part? You get exactly what you wanted without having a clue how the kitchen actually works. Well, this maps perfectly to the world of tech. In this whole scenario, you are the application. Let's say it's your weather app. The kitchen is the server. That's the big, powerful computer where all the weather data lives. And the waiter, you guessed it, that's the API. The API is simply the messenger that takes your request and brings back exactly what you asked for. All right, so the restaurant idea makes sense in theory, but what does this actually look like when you're using an app on your phone? Let's stick with that weather app example and see how this plays out for real. Imagine for a second you're a programmer. You've got this brilliant idea for a new weather app. Now, what's your next step? Are you really going to build your own global network of weather satellites? Launch your own weather balloons? Develop complex meteorological algorithms? No way. That would be completely insane, not to mention insanely expensive. Instead, you do what every smart developer does. You find a company that's already done all that hard work, and you just use their weather API. See, this is the entire philosophy of modern software. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. You just plug into a service that gives you a wheel. So what does one of these requests actually look like? You might be picturing lines and lines of complicated code, but a lot of the time, it's really just a simple URL. Your app sends out a request that looks something like this. It's basically just asking a question in a very specific way. Hey, what's the weather like in Vienna? So the API, our friendly waiter, takes that request, goes to the server, and gets the answer. And what it brings back is just a neat little package of data. In this case, the response might just be some simple text telling your app that the weather in Vienna is, well, cold and depressing. Your app then takes that little piece of data and makes it look pretty on your screen. Now, you can probably imagine that this whole system can't just be a free-for-all. If anyone could ask for anything, anytime they want, things would get chaotic pretty fast. So APIs have some very important rules, a kind of rules of engagement for how this conversation is allowed to happen. First up, you have authentication. Basically, how does the server know who's asking? This is usually handled with something called an API key. The best way to think about it is like a VIP badge for a concert. If you don't have the badge, you're not getting in. Simple as that. It makes sure only authorized apps get access. And then there's rate limiting. What's that? Well, what's to stop a broken app or a bad guy from sending a million requests a second and crashing the whole system? That's what rate limits are for. They're rules that say something like, okay, you're allowed to ask for information, but only 100 times per minute. It's a really smart way to prevent spam and keep everything running smoothly for everyone else. So you see, these rules aren't just about locking things down. They create a stable, predictable, and reliable system. And that reliability is precisely why APIs have totally changed the game for building software. And it's why developers are, frankly, obsessed with them. The reason developers love APIs is actually pretty simple. It's all about efficiency. I mean, think about it. You want to accept credit card payments in your app? You don't need to build a whole payment system from scratch. You just plug into the Stripe API. You want to put a map in your app? You're not launching satellites. You just use the Google Maps API. It lets you build these incredibly powerful things just by connecting to systems that already exist. Okay, so we've got the waiter, we've seen the weather app in action, and we know there are rules. But if we had to boil it all down, what's the single best way to think about what an API really is? It all comes down to one powerful idea. At the end of the day, an API is a contract. That's it.
It is a formal agreement between two pieces of software. It clearly lays out the rules of engagement. It says, look, if you ask me for information in this exact way, I promise I will give you back an answer in this exact format. It's that simple, predictable agreement that makes the whole digital world work.
And that brings us to a final, kind of mind-bending thought. When you really think about it, from your social media feed fetching new posts, to your shopping cart checking if an item is in stock, almost everything you see happening on a screen is the result of these little conversations. So here's the thought. What if the internet we use every single day isn't just powered by APIs? What if it is just one giant, endless conversation between them?